today, and it's actually probably going to be our last lesson on the apostles. Okay, so it's been a while. I think this was 3 months ago, or more than 4, that we started studying the apostles, and then wanted to take one apostle at a time, Peter. And essentially, we started with the 12, then with Peter, James, and John, the inner 3, and then the rest of the apostles. Took them one at a time, and then remember, there's 12 apostles, and the reason why there's a number 12, it's specific, okay, is to counter or to match the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, so this is the kingdom of Christ, and he's fulfilling what Moses and Israel could not do. Okay, they couldn't do it. Let's try this. Okay, and remember, there was more than 12 disciples. Luke chapter 10 says there were 70. Okay, we'll talk about that today. But again, there was more disciples and there was more apostles. It's just there's the official 12. Remember, Judas leaves. Okay, so there's 11. He gets replaced by Matthias, who we're going to talk about today. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the remainder. So we talked about Paul. Obviously, Paul gets a big chunk because of all this information that we have, and he's the most effective apostle that we know, right? As I said, like, Jesus of Nazareth is the most influential person in the world, right? The second most influential, the Apostle Paul, because he talked about Jesus, right? And the way he did. So the Roman Catholic Church says that the Apostle Paul is the 13th apostle. Okay, the Bible doesn't, just the church does. They believe that Barnabas was the 14th apostle, which that's what we studied last week, right? He's known as the man of what? Barnabas is he was known for what? Encouragement. Right? He was encouragement means to come alongside somebody, to fulfill a duty, right? And today we're going to talk about the other apostles that we're supposed to talk about last week, and that's Silas. Okay, we'll talk about today. We'll talk about Apollos. Okay, and then we're going to talk about Matthias, and then lastly we're going to talk about the super apostles that Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians 11, the super apostles. I don't know if you guys heard of the super apostles before? No? Well, it was something that they dealt with in the first century. Okay, really quick today. So, Silas, okay? Silas, so remember this. How many missionary journeys did Paul go on? 3. Okay, so remember, Antioch was where he started. And it's like he did 3 circles or 3 laps. That's what I like to call it, because he went to the exact same places. It's just this is his second missionary journey. He would always start from Antioch, right? And he'd always go to Galatia. This was first one. Remember, he went this way to Cyprus, and he went here and went back, right? Now, for a second and third one, he does the opposite way, right? But he goes to the exact same. He goes to Galatia. Remember his second mission journey. The Holy Spirit or Christ tells him, skip Asia, right? Remember, they'd eventually come back and plant seeds. And why? Because he had a vision of a guy in Macedon, Greece, to come to Greece. And that was their second missionary journey. And guess what he does for the third one? The exact same thing. Okay, so remember, these trips, because we always like to give flowers to the Apostle Paul, right? He was not alone. He had people with him. And the first person he had with him on that his first outbound journey was Barnabas. Okay, but remember, from Cyprus to Pamphylia, as they were going there by boat, remember when they landed, John Mark got, we don't know, scared, right? Something happened where he had to go back to Jerusalem. Paul did not like that. He remembered that. And the way he perceived him is like he's unreliable. Okay, so then, remember, the second missionary journey, so Barnabas and Paul are supposed to be a unit, right? And this is the concept of philosophy, why the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses, they go 2 by 2, right? You see Paul and someone else. And then Jesus says to his disciples in Matthew 10, right, go in 2, right? It's a description. It's not rigid, but this is just the philosophy behind it. But anyways, remember, before the second missionary journey, what happens? Instead of Barnabas and Paul, they get into the dispute because Paul sees that John Mark guy and says, oh, him? I don't want that guy. He's unreliable. But Barnabas, remember, they're cousins. So a little bit of nepotism, or maybe because he just is compassionate, says, hey, look, you got to believe in this guy, right? Maybe he had reasons, or I don't know. But, and Paul and Barnabas, they separate right here. Barnabas goes back to Cyprus, which he's originally from. Paul, for his second missionary journey, goes north, goes to his hometown, Tarsus, right? So essentially, but Paul goes back. But remember, who does he take for the second missionary journey? Silas. Okay, so there's Paul, Barnabas, first missionary journey. Second missionary journey, Paul and Silas. Okay, now, who was Silas? Okay, Silas, did you know, okay, who wrote the book of First and Second Thessalonians? I think Paul did, right? Paul wrote 13, right? 13 letters. Okay. First and Second Thessalonians, Silas wrote it too. Okay, so he's somewhat. We have to give him his flowers. We have to give him his, because people are known for writing something, right? We love the, hey, that was my idea, right? There's something, right? Let's go to First Thessalonians 1 and second. Can someone take Second Thessalonians 1? First Thessalonians 1, and then Second Thessalonians 1. Can someone read that?
First
Thessalonians 1.
Paul and Silvanus and Timothy to the church of the Thessalonians in God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Grace to you and peace.
Okay, so he's also called Silvanus. Okay, so again, but I want to be clear here. It's Paul, right? It's Silvanus, right? Who are the authors of this book. So again, he has some contribution as far as the ideas, and also Timothy. So remember, the reason why we say Timothy too is because Timothy, most likely, Paul converted or planted the seeds here in his first missionary journey. His second missionary journey, when he's with Silas, they pick up Timothy. You see that? They pick up Timothy. And Timothy was there in the third missionary journey too. Okay, so again, contribution as far as him writing a letter. 2 Thessalonians 1:1.
Silas and Silvanus, that's the same person?
Mm-hmm.
So what section is it on?
What's that?
What section?
Just read chapter 1, verse 1. Yeah. Paul, Silvanus, and Timothy to the church of the Thessalonians.
Second Thessalonians.
Yeah. 2 Thessalonians 1:1. Paul, Silvanus, and Timothy to the church of Thessalonians, in God our Father and our Lord Jesus Christ. See that? So again, you have 1 Thessalonians, you have 2 Thessalonians, right? But again, it's not just written by Paul, it's written by Paul, Silas, and Timothy. Okay? So again, there's some contribution there. Now, let's go to Acts 15. Let's all turn to Acts 15. And can someone read verses 22? Okay, and I'll read 1 Peter 5:12. Let's go to Acts 15:22. Acts 15:22.
Then it seemed good to the apostles and the elders with the whole church to choose men from among them and send them to Antioch with Paul and Barnabas. They sent Judas called Barsabas,
Mm-hmm.
and Silas, leading men among the brothers. To what section did you say?
That's it. No, just verse 22. But you see that how remember look at the context. This is Acts 15. This is the Council of Jerusalem. Remember this: the first missionary journey of Paul. Remember they did that circle and they went back to Antioch, and then the Jews that they don't want to hear anything. They want to persecute Paul instead. And as a result, you have these Gentiles. They go to the Gentiles, non-Jews, and then they start to convert, right? And then they go back to Antioch, and then there's this dispute that happens that, wait a moment, the Gentiles are not circumcised. They need to be circumcised. The Jews are saying this, the Judaizers, right? They're Jews that they want some Jewish influence in Christianity, and then now there's this dispute. So Barnabas says, yeah, they need to be circumcised. Peter says, yeah, they need to be circumcised. Paul says, no, right? It's faith. It's faith, right? All of us in this room, we're all Gentiles. We're not Jewish, right? So do we need to follow Jewish customs, right? And Paul says, no, it's faith. So as a result, remember they're in Antioch, they send word to Jerusalem, because that's where the council, and they have this council. This is Acts 15. Now, to send encouragement back to Antioch, what do? They send who? Silas. Silvanus, right? From one place to another, showing he's a reliable man. Okay, so remember, Silas went on a missionary journey with Peter. 1 Peter 5:12 says, and some people believe he was the carrier of the letter. But Silvanus, this is 1 Peter 5:12, but Silvanus, a faithful brother, as I regard him, I have written briefly to you, exhorting and declaring that this is the true grace of God. Stand firm in it. Okay? So again, Peter acknowledging Silvanus also, and he says, verse 13, see who is at Babylon, most likely Rome, as they called it, who is likewise chosen, sends you greeting, and so does Mark, my son. Okay? So remember that John. I added verse 13. Hey Chris, I added verse 13 to kind of to highlight last week to show that he's calling out John Mark, my son. So there's some reconciliation. The reason why I say that is because you can look at him as a coward, right? And like, oh, they always thought we define people by their mistakes. It's human nature, right? But it kind of shows the Christian principle of like forgiveness, and like someone can move on from that, right? You don't have to define them by their low points in life, right? But anyways, the point is he is calling Silas, what? A faithful brother. Okay, so Silas essentially is known as being someone that's a faithful brother in the Lord. Okay, being faithful is being dependable, right? Now remember this. Paul wanted someone dependable because he was hurt. Let's be honest. When we get hurt, you lose trust, right? And then your guard goes up, right? So Paul, he probably had trust issues after his first missionary journey, and he wanted someone what? Dependable, faithful. So his first missionary journey, John Mark leaves him. He has that betrayal, and the second missionary journey, he's like, I'm not dealing with this again. I want someone dependable. Silas. Okay. Silas was also a fearless man. Let's go to Acts 16. Acts 16. So guys, online we're looking at Silas, and then we're gonna look at Apollos, Matthias, and the super apostles. So we're looking at Silas right now. Let's go to Acts 16. Can someone read 22 to 25?
The crowd joined in attacking them, and the magistrates tore the garments off them and gave orders to beat them with rods. And when they had inflicted many blows upon them, they threw them into prison, ordering the jailer to keep them safely. Having received this order, he put them into the inner prison and fastened their feet in the stocks.
Okay, so here, remember this. This is what we see here. This is the second missionary journey where they're in prison, right, in Philippi. Then they go to Thessalonica. Then they go to Berea, and then they go to Athens. But when they're in Philippi, this is where both of them get persecuted, and then they're in jail, right? And then while they're in jail in Philippi, remember there's an earthquake that happens. Their shackles gets unloosed, and all of a sudden, the Roman guard comes in. He's like, no one's there, and what happens to the Roman guard? Gets his gladius, a Roman sword, is about to kill himself because he's going to die anyways, right? So the guards that were in charge of looking after Jesus' tomb, guess what? There was a death penalty on them, right? Same thing with the guard here in Philippi. That he knew it, right? And right before he kills himself, what does Paul do? Don't.
We're here.
We're here, right? And what happens? Gets converted. You and your household. Okay, but again, there's a sense of a fearlessness that happens with the Apostle Paul and Silas. Remember, Silas is a faithful man, but he's dependable. But again, the amount of persecution that they endure, right, on their second missionary journey, especially Paul. But again, Silas was part of that too. Okay, Silas was also a prophet. Let's go back to chapter 15, verse 32. Chapter 15, Acts 15:32 says, "And Judas and Silas, who were themselves prophets." See that? Acts 15:32. "And Judas and Silas, who were themselves what? Prophets. Encourage and strengthen the brothers with many words." Okay, now, is it, if I say the word prophet, what comes to your mind? What comes to mind?
Daniel.
Daniel? Okay, well, what about Daniel?
Well, he was a prophet.
Okay.
I mean, he's like a major.
Okay, so like the person, you're thinking of the person, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
The reason why I ask is because, so the Greek word prophemi, it's meant to declare the word. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Now when I say prophet, okay, depending on your church upbringing, okay, Pentecostal, charismatic, remember this. In the Old Testament, it was typically, if you're a prophet, it's always future tense. Okay, It's future tense, and it's very specific. So, I got a prophecy, Sister Jane. When you walk outside, there's going to be a guy, and he's going to be wearing a pink jacket with a backwards cap, and there's going to be a Z on it behind him. You're not going to see it, but don't worry, it's there. But he's going to, you know what I mean? Like, you see how specific it is? That's what a prophecy was like. Nowadays, depending on your church, a lot of it is just generalized. Like, Sister Jane, the Lord's gonna cover you with His feathers, because the season that you're going through is a little shaky, but God's gonna come through and send a person to encourage you. You know, like that can happen to all of us, right? We all go through a lot of, painful, traumatic, unfortunate situations where our hearts want comfort, and we naturally, I can't hold God, so who do we get comfort from? People, right? From people. Like, that's just going to happen. So I could say that to Sister Jane, but I can say it to all of you too. And because when you're in the moment, you're very vulnerable. So it's like we want that answer. It's like a fortune teller kind of thing. So it's like confirmation bias. We want to hear that. So I say that because there's no specific future tense word that Silas got. I'm not saying he did not, but notice how Luke says they were prophets. What? Encouraged and strengthened the brothers with many, and that's also a New Testament concept of a prophet. Is that you were one that encouraged people, you were one that spoke the word, you were one that strengthened. Okay. Paul in 1 Corinthians 14 talks about prophecy, and he says this. 1 Corinthians 14:3 says, "The one who prophesies speaks to people for their what? Strengthening, encouragement, and comfort." You see that? So again, he fits into that New Testament concept as far as it was one that you were one that encouraged, one that strengthened too. Okay, so it's possible that he was an actual Old Testament prophet. Like, I'm not saying he did not, but what we know as far as the text is he was one that encouraged. That was the type of prophet that he was. Okay. Last, Silas was a Roman citizen. Okay, he was a Roman citizen. Acts 16:37. Acts 16:37 says, and this is when they converted the jailer, and then they're about to go to Berea, and he says, verse 37, Acts 16. "But Paul said to them, 'They have beaten us publicly, uncondemned men who are Roman citizens, and have thrown us into prison. And do they now throw us out secretly?'" But notice how he says, "They have beaten us uncondemned" what? Men. Okay? Who are what? Roman citizens, plural. Okay? So it's not just Paul who's a Roman citizen, it's him and the guy he's beaten up with, who is Silas. Okay? Obviously, them being a Roman citizen, it worked in their, as far as their advantage to survive the situation. Okay? So this is Paul's second missionary journey. Who we had Silas, but again, Silas is a faithful person. He's fearless. He is a prophet. He's a Roman citizen. And remember, he's a writer. He contributed to the first and second Thessalonians. Okay? So this is Silas. Okay? Any questions?
How old was he?
What's that?
How old was Silas at this point?
Most likely around, like they were around all the same age, around the age of Christ, or a little younger. Yeah, so Paul was 5 to 10 years younger than Christ. Yeah, because we say 6 to 9 AD, Paul was born, right?
He was in his 20s?
Well,
I believe you. It doesn't really matter.
No. Most likely, yeah. He was in his 20s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but remember, years went by. Remember, he was like
in prison, right?
3 years in Saudi Arabia, right?
Arabia.
14 years up north. Like there was time that happened. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Yeah, if that's the case, yeah, Paul was in his 20s when the road to Damascus happened.
Wow.
Yeah. So most likely late to mid 20s. Yeah. Wow. Right.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Apollos. Okay. Now Apollos is someone that we know but don't really know from. Like, have you guys heard of the word Apollos before? No. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think you do, but you don't. Okay. So Apollos was not part of the 12, right? But he's mentioned. Let's all go to Acts 18. Acts 18. Acts 18. And can someone read Acts 18, 24 to 25?
Now a certain Jew named Apollos, born at Alexandria, an eloquent man and mighty in the scriptures, came to Ephesus. This man had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in spirit, he spoke and taught accurately the things of the Lord, though he only knew the baptism of John. So he began to speak boldly in the synagogue. When Aquila and Priscilla heard him, they took him aside and explained to him the way of God more accurately. And when he desired, is that enough?
Yeah, that's perfect. So, what does it say? Apollos, okay. Apollos was from Alexandria. Okay, that's Egypt. Now, it says he was Jewish, okay, and he's from Alexandria. Now, Alexandria around this time was very influential when it came to logic, when it came to reason, when it came to philosophy. I know people typically think this part right here, Greece, right? But around this part right here, which is Alexandria, he was a Jew, okay? A Jew, but from Alexandria, which meant that he was most likely... So have you guys heard of the Library of Alexandria? So it was known around this time to be the place of knowledge, of all human knowledge. So there was around 40,000 to 400,000 papyrus scrolls. This was an actual library around this time. But we don't have it today, and the reason why we don't know, like imagine all the history and like we're talking about archaeology and history, the content we would have had today if we still had the Alexandrian library. The things that we don't, you know what I mean? Like the amount of, but I say this because some people say it might have been Julius Caesar's wars that might have contributed. Some people say there was a fire. This is a large fire that happened. But the point is, around this time, it was known as a place of education, right? On top of that, there was an influential philosopher around this time named Philo of Alexander. Have you Philo of Alexander? Okay, so Philo of Alexander lived between 20 BC, so 20 years before Christ, to like 58, so he's 70 years old when he died. But like, essentially, he lived during the time of Christ, during the time of the Apostle Paul. But he wrote a lot. He wrote a lot. He's right here in Alexandria. But he wrote commentaries on the Old Testament. He was Jewish. Philo of Alexander was Jewish, didn't convert to Christianity that we know of, but he wrote commentaries on the Old Testament, and he merged philosophy, right, with theology. And then he was a big influence around this part. So anyone that came out of Alexandria, most likely they had that mindset. And Philo or Apollos most likely had that mindset, right? What does it say? It says what? And it says in verse 24, he was eloquent man, competent in the scriptures. Eloquence and competent in the scriptures. Reason, philosophy, but theology. He knows the Old Testament. Okay, so it's almost like he's copying Philo. Apollos, Philo. Okay? And what does it say? It says Aquila and Priscilla. Do you guys remember Aquila and Priscilla? Right? Paul mentions them, right? So remember, Paul, by his trade, he made tents, and Aquila and Priscilla, they also made tents, right? So if you're a mechanic, you walk into a room and there's two other mechanics, like, hey, you already have something to talk about, right? Same thing with the Apostle Paul, right? So the thing is this, him with his education, with his eloquence, what happens? He comes here and all of a sudden he's speaking, and as he's speaking, this couple pulls him aside and says, hey, we agree with everything you're saying, but not quite, right? It's very humbling. It's very humbling, especially if you're leading with reason, if you're leading with like pride, and what does Paul say? Knowledge puffs up, right? But you can kind of see the point is so Apollos was most likely a disciple of John the Baptist. Okay, he was most likely a disciple of John the Baptist, but by the time remember, so he's here, Alexandria is like right here, okay, and we're talking about Ephesus, and so Apollos was influential in Ephesus and Corinth, in Greece. So these two places he'd go back and forth, okay, and as he's here, he's speaking to the Jews, but remember, Aquila and Priscilla, they have to pull him aside and like, hey, you're right, but not fully. And the reason why is this. Most likely, Apollos, because he was a disciple of John the Baptist, remember, information wasn't as widespread. There was no, you look at your phone, there's no newspapers, right, as far as news coming around. Most likely, the Apollos, his message was one of repentance. His message was that Jesus is the Messiah, right? But that's about it. So when Aquila and Priscilla come along, remember, they have the full gospel. What do they say? Well, there's the death, there's the burial, and there's a resurrection of Jesus. They have to give him more content as far as the gospel. Remember, the content of the gospel matters in this case, right? The content of the gospel matters, meaning you can say that Jesus is Lord, okay? That's his identity, but what did he do? Right? So when it comes to the gospel, right, we have a definition in 1 Corinthians 15, 3 and 5, which talks about, it's the earliest account as far as a tradition being communicated. 1 Corinthians 3 and 5 was a saying that the Apostle Paul quoted, but it was his death, it was his burial, and it was his resurrection. It's what he did. So remember, there's who Jesus is, his identity. He is God. He's the Son of God. He's the Messiah. But that's not sufficient as far as his identity. There's also what Jesus did, and that is he died on the cross, and he resurrected from the dead. Right? So again, that's the full gospel. Right? That's the full gospel. Apollos, probably mostly he just communicated this is who he is. He's the Messiah, right? Because John the Baptist, gave him the call. So, anyways, it's interesting to see someone learning in real time. As far as I learned from John the Baptist, but I didn't hear about the death and resurrection part, right? But again, information was spreading around this time, and he was corrected. Okay, one thing we can learn from Apollos here is humility and teachability. Okay, humility and teachability, meaning that he was able to be corrected. Right? How many of you guys say you know a lot about a subject, and you take pride in it, and all of a sudden you were wrong, and someone has to correct you? What does that do to your soul? What does it do to your soul? It stings, right? What does that hurt? Your pride, right? Your ego, right? Because we're supposed to have all knowledge and all wisdom, right? And I'm supposed to, you don't go to ChatGPT, you go to me, right? Right? We have that, the pride in us. But again, Apollos, he took it, right? It's a good sign when you see someone confronted. Peter, right? He took it, versus you deny it, right? But it shows humility here. Okay. Let's continue. Can someone read verses? Can someone read verses the same passage? Acts 18. So when I was in Canada, guys, and I was speaking, when someone texts me, ding, on my computer, that's what I was like, oh God, it's so embarrassing, because people would just text. I thought you guys heard it online. That's what I was like, did you hear that? So, right. So anyways, you can hear it now. They can't. Yeah. So, Acts 18. Can someone 27 to 28?
Paul had been thinking about going to Achaia,
Yeah.
and the brothers and sisters in Ephesus encouraged him to go. They wrote to the believers in Achaia, asking them to welcome him. When he arrived there, he proved to be of great benefit to those who, by God's grace, had believed. 28 too, is that what you said? 28
It's
also?
28 to 28. All right.
Okay.
So
He refuted the Jews with powerful arguments in public debate. Using the scriptures, he explained to them that Jesus was the Messiah.
There you go. All right, that's a message. Jesus is the Messiah to the Jews. Jesus is the Messiah, okay? But notice how it says this. And when he wished to cross to what? Achaia. Okay, so now what does it say? This was, remember, he was in Greece around this time. Now, let's so this is where he went. Okay, so now we're right here. Okay. So this is Greece, Athens, Corinth. When we say 1 Corinthians, that's Greece. Okay. Now, in Corinthians, remember I'm saying when I asked you guys, do you guys know who Apollos is? And you're like, there are certain names. There's certain names that if I say it, it'll ring a bell, and it's like, wait, I've heard that, like Priscilla, Aquila. But when I say Apollos, okay. His name comes out not from the book of Acts, for me, when I think, not from the book of Acts, but from 1 Corinthians. Okay, from 1 Corinthians. Now, let's all go to 1 Corinthians 1:12. Can someone read that? 1 Corinthians 1:12.
Some of you are saying, I am a follower of Paul. Others are saying, I follow Apollos, or I follow Peter, or I follow only Jesus.
All right, so this is where we hear the word Apollos. Okay, when I'm saying like does this not ring a bell? Right, this passage, very famous. Okay, what I mean is that what some say, I follow Paul, I follow what? Apollos. Right? Or I follow Cephas, meaning Peter, or I follow Christ. So we have four divisions there. Some people follow Jesus, some people follow Paul, some people follow Peter, some people follow Apollos. Those are big names, right? If I say Peter, it's a big name, right? He's the first pope, apparently. If I say the Apostle Paul, it's a big name, most influential apostle. If I say Jesus, yeah, really, really big name. But Apollos, why is his name there? Okay. Let's go to chapter 3, 1 Corinthians chapter 3. And can someone read 4 to 9? 1 Corinthians chapter 3, 4 to 9.
For when one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos, are you not being merely human? What then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants through whom you believed, as the Lord assigned to each. Did you say through
9 to 9.
I planted, Apollos watered. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything but only God who gives the growth. He who plants and he who waters are one, and each will receive his wages according to his labor. For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field, God's building.
Okay. So, when this time here, when it came to in Corinth, remember, Greece, okay? Greece was known for what? Philosophy. Okay, a lot of the way we think today stems from this place right here. Okay, reason, logic, philosophy. You had a guy by the name of Socrates. He was a teacher, right? And he didn't write anything, but he was just a teacher. And he had a student, and his name was Plato. And Plato wrote. Plato wrote all this stuff down, right? And then that's how we know of Socrates and Plato. And then Plato had a student too, and his name was Aristotle, right? So Socrates, Plato, and he wrote too, right? And ironically, Aristotle, okay, had a student too, and his name was Alexander the Great. Okay, so what was big around Greece around this time, okay, and it was bubbling up, okay, before. So this is the concept of epistemology, like knowledge, why we think the way we think, right? Around this time, it was this sin called hubris, the vice of hubris, which means dangerous pride, right, or vainglory, okay. And you have Socrates, you have Plato, you have Aristotle, you have Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great dies in the year 323, okay, and after 323. You had something called building statues, building busts for your favorite generals. So it slowly evolved. So it was first discouraged, right? It was first discouraged, and all of a sudden that begins to bubble up. And then when Rome conquered Greece, instead of it being a vice, it became a virtue, right? So almost everyone wanted a bust. I don't know what you can consider a bust today. No, not a tattoo. Tattoos are too low. Like that. That's like the highest. You know what I mean? Maybe a holiday after you know, or a street or something. That's what we do. You want to honor someone, and at the end of the day, you don't want to forget them.
Trophy.
A trophy, yeah. But maybe a trophy with your name on it or your face on it. Like there's a sense of like we won't forget you. Okay, so honor essentially is, at the end of the day, the most painful part of humanity, and especially being, this is our ontological nature, this is just the way we are, is that we are created to be known, right? Remember I spoke about glory? We are created to be known. You're not called to be alone. That's why if you're alone and you have no sense of connection, you will deal with loneliness. It's a science. It's like, you put it's like gravity, it will happen, okay? Now, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Our nature. Okay. The thing is this: it's within our nature to be known. Now, the problem with our sin nature is it gets excessive to the point we want to be the complete center. Now, that reality of I need to be known with another painful with a painful reality. Okay. So this is natural. What's natural is to be known. Natural. Okay. In moderation, okay? But the painful part is that you want to be known, but the reality is there's something called death and forgetfulness, okay? In essence, people are going to forget who you are. That's just the painful part of it, right? All of us in this room, most likely, we're going to be forgotten, right? You have a tombstone, and then they say your kids will be there. Maybe your grandkids, but that's about it, right? As far as knowledge, that personable, they could read about you, but it becomes non-anecdotal at that point. People, once your heart's on in it, your body won't really move on with it. It gets painful, but there's something in us where we fight to be known regardless of that, right? Remember Ernest Becker's book, The Denial of Death? He essentially says, Man, and he's an atheist who wrote this book in 1973, wrote this book and says, like, man chases to be known. It goes against it. We don't like it, so we strive for excellence. We strive for greatness. Essentially, we're striving to be known and fighting death at the same time. So even when I'm dead, how can you remember me? Maybe I can invent a technology where there's a hologram, my face is there, and you can just, all the generations, right? We do this, right? Now, Greece at the time. Now, remember, so there's Greece, Socrates' time. Now this is around the Roman Empire time. Now it's not discouraged, it's encouraged. Now people fight for honor. People fight to be recognized. People fight to, is there a bust about me? Hey, my cheekbone is a little, like the people were. This is the way that the Caesars thought. Okay, so this is the way they thought at the time. Okay, and what they loved was eloquence, intelligence, and they quickly gravitated towards people who could speak, who had a certain look to them, who knew who, right? So as a result, what do people do? What do people do in the book of Corinthians? They follow the most eloquent person. And one of the most eloquent speakers, what we read in Acts 18, was Apollos. Not only was he educated, because he's from Alexandria, but he knew how to speak, right? So when he came to Corinth and he was speaking, people said, wow, he's my favorite preacher. I might buy his book, right? Right? But look who he's competing with. The Apostle Paul, the Apostle Peter, Jesus himself, right? Right? And then now there's teams of the Apollos, meaning that he had some gift to the point he can create his own faction and be like, yeah, this is my group. I can start my own denomination, right? But he didn't. Right? He didn't. So what you could see here in Apollos is that he had some sense of influence in Corinth. I don't know his influence as far as Jerusalem, and most likely there wasn't any. And what we get from Corinthians, I think his influence was really here. That's why Paul was saying, what did Paul say in 1 Corinthians 1? He's like, people were fighting over who's going to baptize who, right? So, I want Apollos to baptize me. Oh, I want Paul to baptize me, right? And they pick teams. We do that. We do the same thing, right? I remember at Grace Church, when I was part of Grace Church, there was baptisms on Sunday nights. But you know what people waited to do? They waited for John MacArthur to go there so they could say, I was baptized by John MacArthur. Right? And it's like, imagine you got sick and you're like baptized by Rick McLean, he's a mentor of mine, but it's like, oh man, I want to people, but it was very common. It was very common. This is like what? The last couple of years, right? And the same attitude happened 2,000 years ago in Corinth. Right? So again, we do that as people. We like to pick sides. We like to pick, who's our favorite, preacher or, but again, what this shows of Apollos, okay, is that he was one of unity, meaning that he could have been a man that says, you know what, wow, like Bar Jesus. Remember Bar Jesus in Paul's first expedition, right? He wanted that power, not for the kingdom of Christ, but for his own honor, right? Apollos, he had that honor in the sense that he was building influence, but there was no sense of division in him, right? He followed the kingdom. Okay. Also, is that he was a man that died to vainglory, because he had it. He had that notoriety. I remember I spoke on the topic of vainglory or hubris. I remember I said, we all have a need for glory, and glory I define as affirmation or being known. Like that. If you want to know the essence of a human soul, is who knows them, right? Not the guarded version. I'm talking about like the vulnerable version. Like that is the essence of the human soul, is which person knows you in a very personable way. That's glory. Okay? Problem with what sin did is that all of a sudden it became our known nature, me being known, you being known, became disordered to the point it's not one person, it's not two people, it's not three family, it's now 300, it's now 400, it's now 4,000, 40, right? Influencers, right? We have the word celebrity. You see that? And it's not enough. It is not enough. So we have our need for glory to be known. And the thing is, glory's need for people right? You can't be known by a dog. You can't be known by a picture. It has to be a human being. So people need to be involved. But the thing is this: people's need for glamour, and this is where there's a diversion. Meaning, if I need to be known, say I need to be known by you guys, and it just makes me feel complete being known and validated. What if this version isn't really me? So if I'm really me, maybe I lose half my knownness or followers, and I'm therefore dissatisfied or feeling insignificant. Well, I'm gonna have to show my glamour and act, right, to get as much attention as much glory as possible, right? See how it evolves, and all of a sudden, if there's a duplicity, then it also ultimately leads to death, right? You're acting your entire life, and people live like this, right? But what I'm saying is that in 1 Corinthians 1:12, Apollos, he had that ability, he had the opportunity to receive glory, but didn't receive it. Okay? So again, this is just you can see these themes kind of like in our culture today, right? When you study just the concept of being known before was so hard, right? You have to be a pope, a monarch, some president, you have to write a really good book or something like that, and then after World War II it became acting. Sinatra, Dean Martin, the Rat Pack, Elvis, Marilyn Monroe, the Beatles, right? And then all of a sudden you had reality TV shows, right? 2008, 2009, the Kardashians, Hiltons, and then all of a sudden 2020 was the rise of the influencers. Now there's a complete equilibrium in the world. So I can just get my phone, and if I make a video that goes viral, everyone knows me, right? So again, it's interesting studying the evolution of being known. But again, this goes all the way back to David, Saul. Remember, Saul has killed his thousands. David has killed his what? 10,000s. Right? There's that. Danny, did you see?
Yeah, no, it's to the point. You think about Jodie Foster, Chapman. They'll do anything. They'll kill somebody that's so famous, and they'll be famous for the rest of their lives because of who they killed.
Was it
for
John
being
Lennon?
popular. It's that easy, and they're still doing it. They want to be famous to try to impress somebody. I'll be famous at something, even if it's murdering an innocent man.
Was it John Lennon's murder in New York? Remember when he killed him? He was a fan of John Lennon. And he's like, why'd you kill him? He's like, I just want to be the guy that killed John Lennon.
That's right.
It's like, all right, well, yeah. But again, but you see how that innate need of to be known, and all of a sudden there's that disordered desire. St. Augustine talks about that. Essentially, it gets nasty, right? The habituation of a vice, how it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. It evolves. You ever think of I always like to philosophize and ask, how did that person get to where they're at, right? Or why would someone do such a thing? And there's a habituation, meaning that you are what you do. It becomes a habit. That's how character is formed. You can do one thing and mess up, but it doesn't necessarily define you. But if you keep doing it, that's what Aristotle says. If you keep doing it, it defines your character. So say, for instance, like someone, if they're addicted to pornography, say at 13 years old, and do it for a decade, so 13 to 23, and they just watch pornography. There's going to be a point, if that's all they do, they're going to get bored. And then there's going to be some sense of devolvement where it's going to turn into something else. And you ever think of, how does someone become a pedophile? How does someone become right? It evolves, or it devolves essentially, right? So same thing with anger, right? It starts with a grudge, it starts with bitterness, and you might give them the cold shoulder. It's all of a sudden you cuss them out to the point you want to get violent, to the point you want to kill them, to the point you want to kill their family, right? You see how it grows, right? The same thing with vainglory, right? It all starts from like a little desire of when you were young, and like you caught the baseball, and you know what your knee-jerk reaction was? Did Dad see it? Right? You look to see the summer. I play the piano, and right after the piece, everyone starts clapping, and people are clapping, but you look for specific people, Mom and Dad, right? And there's that emotion that we have of validation. But if that's not met, that thing will grow and grow and grow and grow to the point. I'm the guy that runs onto the football field at a Super Bowl, right? So everyone can see, right? But how does someone get to that point in life? What made them do that? It didn't just happen. It evolved, right? Danny?
Ted Bundy. I mean, you
Yeah.
saw him just prior to them killing him. How he evolved and
Yeah.
how it started. He was raised by a Christian mom, a good mom, and then little by little, you know the story. A little bit of Playboy and go on, and he wasn't happy until he saw, killing women. It was a progressive. He goes, hey, it was a progressive thing. I was a normal guy. But I kept on going, just like you said, pornography.
Yeah.
It gets into something very, very dark sometimes.
Yeah. So again, this is like, I believe there's a set nature. Like I truly believe like this is where theology comes in. Like we were talking about last week. Like there's layers to this as far as civilization, but like theology is that layer where you understand anthropology, you understand people. Right, and we have thousands of years to test it out to see how people respond. If you were to put food or money or, and just it's just interesting. But and him too, Ted Bundy understood human nature. He would read women, and just see who's needy, who's vulnerable, right? So, 1 Corinthians. Let me read to you 1 Corinthians 16. So we're on 1 Corinthians 16, 12. And he says, now concerning our brother Apollos, again mentions Apollos, I strongly urge him to visit you with other brothers, but it was not at all his will to come now. So he denied. Paul says, go there. He says no. Okay, but I want. Can someone read Titus 3:13? Titus 3:13. Titus 3:13.
Diligently help Silas the lawyer and Apollos on their way, so that nothing is lacking for them.
Okay, so mentioned second. This is Titus 3:13. And Zenas the lawyer. Okay, and who does he mention? Apollos. So my point of reading these passages later on is, it shows that Apollos was still involved in the mission. There was no John Mark moment. There was no he abandoned the faith. There was no. He continued. You see that? So again, this is Apollos, okay? Now, because of time, I'm going to speed up here. Matthias, okay? Have you heard of Matthias before? Let's all go to Acts 1. Acts 1. Acts chapter 1. And can someone read Acts 1? Can someone read 21 to 26? Acts 1, 21 to 26.
Oh, 21 to 26. Okay. All right, let's see.
So one of the men who have accompanied us during all the time that the Lord Jesus went in and out among us, beginning from the baptism of John until the day when he was taken up from us. One of these men must become with us a witness to his resurrection. What did you say, 21 to what?
26.
Okay, they put forward to a Joseph called Barabbas, who's also called Justus and Matthias. And they prayed and said, you Lord, who know the hearts of all, show which one of these two you have chosen to take the place in the ministry and apostleship from which Judas turned aside to go to his own place. And they cast lots for them, and the lot fell on Matthias, and he was numbered with the 11th apostle.
All right. So if you ever wonder, remember we started off this whole series with 12, right? So there was 12, and they were all picked by Jesus. But remember, one of them betrayed him, Judas Iscariot. So this is Acts 1. Remember, if we read before this passage in verse 21, it talks about the suicide of Judas Iscariot, right? Killed himself. He hung himself. It says his intestines came out of him, right? Earlier in this passage. But after, what did the church do? They had to fill his role. So some people believe that it was Paul. It's like, no, it was Matthias in Acts chapter 1. So remember, this shows the significance of they had to maintain the number 12. They had to maintain the number 12. So after Judas, they replaced him with Matthias. Okay, but notice how they do it is that what do they do? They cast lots. So most likely, it talks about Justus, right, in verse 23, and Matthias, is that most likely these were other disciples too from Luke chapter 10. So Luke chapter 10 is the only passage in all the Gospels that reference 70 disciples. Because remember, we always think 12 disciples, 12 disciples. Remember, Luke 10 says there were 70 disciples. And that's the same author. Remember, Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke, and he wrote Acts. So this book is a continuation of Luke, right? So most likely Justus and Matthias, they were part of the other. Again, this is just speculation, but most likely they were part of the 70 in Luke chapter 10, right? And what do they do at this time? They cast lots, right? Was it possible for the Holy Spirit to just tell? Could have been in Acts 16. Remember, the Holy Spirit tells Paul and Silas, skip Asia, right? Go to Greece, essentially, right? Not here. What do? They cast lots. Okay, now casting lots was the equivalent of rolling dice. They were stones, right? And on one side of the stone, it said something. On the other side, it said another thing. It would be blank, and you kind of rolled it, and whoosh, it would just fall into whatever, right? Casting lots is in 1 Samuel 14, where King Saul had to cast lots to see the food shortage. And there was many things. There was the Urim and Thummim, right, what King David had, and that's what the priests use. And it would essentially in their breastplate, they would have their breastplate, and underneath, right, and here would be a bag, and it'd be a white rock and a black rock, right? And then for King David, it'd be like, should I go left or should I go right? And then the Urim and Thummim, they would choose from the bag and be like, oh, white rock, white rock, white rock, white rock. God is saying go right, right? The same thing with casting lots was there was stone or sometimes straw, right? They would just pick a straw, and then this was their sign that this was the way God was speaking, right? So the disciples, they cast lots, and who did it go to? Dice went to Matthias. So they interpret it. This is the way that God. This is the will of God, right? But notice in how he says too, and they put beginning from the baptism of John until the day when he was taken up from one of us. One of these men must become with us a witness to his resurrection. That's why when it comes to apostle, did they see the resurrected body of Jesus Christ? That's why all of us today are not apostles. You go to the Pentecostal, Apostle John, Apostle. No, have you seen the resurrected body? That's what an apostle was. So Paul saw the resurrected Jesus in Acts chapter 9. That's why he says, no, I'm an apostle. I saw him. He talked to me. I wanted to kill all these people. Now he came to me and talked. I'm an apostle. Right? Danny?
What exactly does the number 70 represent?
Well, biblical numerology. 7 is the number of completion. That's really it. It's the number. It's the perfect. It just means complete. Now 70, I don't know.
You said apostles, 70. Is that what you said?
Disciples.
70?
There were 70 disciples.
Disciples. Okay, I'm sorry.
Now, as far as the 70, did they see the resurrected body after? I don't know. 1 Corinthians 15 says there was 500 people that saw him, right? So, I don't know. To say that the 70 was part of this, I don't know, right? But, anyways, this is the life of Matthias. I said we don't know a lot about him. We do know that when he dies, 100 years later, 200 years later, around this time, 2nd and 3rd century, there was Acts. The Acts of Andrew and Matthias was written, most likely not by them. Obviously, they're dead, but it tells a story of Matthias going into a cannibalistic tribe and preaching the gospel and being kidnapped by them. They're about to eat him, and then he preached them the gospel and got out. So, yeah. So, anyways, let's finish here. Let's all go to 2 Corinthians 11. 2 Corinthians 11. And if I could have someone read verses 1 to 5 and skip and go to 13 to 15. So 2 Corinthians 11, 1 to 5, and then 13 to 15.
Eleven, 1 to 5.
1 to
Second
5, and then 13 to
Corinthians
15.
Yeah, but okay. 2 Corinthians 1 to 5.
11, 1 to 5.
11, 1 to
Yeah,
5.
yeah.
I know, sorry. Okay, got it. You also helping together in prayer for us, that thanks may be given by many persons on our behalf for the gift granted to us through many. Paul's sincerity. For our boasting is this, the testimony of our conscience, that we conduct ourselves in the world in simplicity and godly sincerity, not with fleshy wisdom, but by the grace of God, and more abundantly towards you. For we are not writing any other things to you than you read or understand. Now I trust you will understand even to the end. And also you have understood us in part, that we are your boast, as you also are ours in the day of the Lord Jesus, sparing the church. And in this confidence, I intended to come to you before, that you might have a second benefit. Is that it to 15?
Is that chapter 11, 2 Corinthians 11?
Yeah, 2 Corinthians. Wait a second. I have to go back up now. Oh no, that's 1.
Yeah.
It's 2 Corinthians first. Well, you let me read the whole thing.
Yeah, look, so 11, 1 to 5. Okay,
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, where am I? And
Sorry.
as you go there, Chris, just really quick, I forgot, was that, if you ever wonder, was the number 12 passed up, like, was it maintained? Most likely not. After the Acts 1, like, that number 12 was solidified, and then it just disintegrated. Like, they just made disciples, like, that number was not kept, is what I'm trying to say. Because your logic would be, well, if they filled in 11 to 12, why didn't they keep that, right? But it kind of disintegrated. So the Mormon Church believes in the continuity of the 12, right? Which is why they use the word apostles. They have the 12 and all that. So,
But the 70 after the 12 wouldn't be add more and more to make it 70?
that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think they maintained these numbers. I think these numbers just disintegrated, and like, there was a hierarchy in the church. I think there was leadership in the church, but it wasn't rigid to like 12. You know what I mean? Like the 2nd century there was 12, 3rd century there was 12. You know what I mean? There wasn't that like pope. You pass it down like apostolic succession. Yeah. So sorry, Chris. 2 Corinthians
11, 1
Yeah.
to 12.
So 11, 1 to 5.
1 to 5.
And then
Sorry, I'm
13
so
to
sorry.
15.
I have
No,
a new app,
Oh, you're
and
good.
it's jumping around.
You're good.
Oh, that you would bear with me a little folly, and indeed you do bear with me. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
For I'm jealous for you with godly jealousy, for I have betrothed you to one husband, that I may present you as the chaste virgin to Christ. But I fear lest somehow, as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, so your minds may be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. For if he who comes preaches another Jesus, whom we have not preached, or if you receive a different spirit which you have not received, or a different gospel which you have not accepted, you may well put up with it, Paul and false apostles. For I consider that I am not at all inferior to the most eminent apostles.
Okay. Verse 5. Yours says false apostles, Chris. What does yours say? Anyone else?
It says the most eminent apostles. Oh, at the top, 4 says you may well put up with it, Paul and false apostles. This is the New King James Version. It's just
What about verse 5? What does it say?
It says, for I consider that I am not at all inferior to the most eminent apostles.
It says super apostles.
Super apostles, eminent apostles,
Eminent.
mine super apostles, super apostles. Paul is being sarcastic here.
Yeah.
Okay, he's essentially, there was these guys, 1st century, claiming to be apostles. Okay, and they were claiming some more superior status to Paul and the disciples based upon their looks, the way they carried themselves, their words, their prestige. Apollos could have been one. You know what I mean? Like, that's the way they carry themselves. So super apostles. And then, Chris, can you read 13 to 15? Same chapter, just skip to 13, 15.
Okay. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into the angel of light. An angel of light, not the angel of light. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works, reluctant boasting.
All right. So this is the reason why I bring this, because we're talking about the apostles, right? And there was something called super apostles, right? Or elite. And Paul is being sarcastic here because they're not apostles at all. He says these are false apostles, okay? Now, what's going on in the first century is, remember, honor, glorification, okay? You go 2,000 years ago and you take that, you psychoanalyze everything they're going through, you jump to the year 2026, no different. No, same human nature. All we have now is just technology, right? But we carry our nature with us, okay? And what was happening at the time is Christianity was a new thought. Remember, it blew up. As far as in 300 years, it took over the Roman Empire. Right, the year 380, the Council of Thessalonica, where it became the official religion of the Roman Empire, was Christianity, right? But is that there was a new honor that happened when it came to the apostles, and people wanted it. Remember, Paul's first missionary journey, what was it, right? From Antioch, right, to Cyprus, and who they encountered Cyprus? Bar Jesus, a false apostle that wanted the gospel or the power that came from it, healing and whatnot, essentially just for his own prestige and honor, right? He wanted to go around, and it's no different from the super apostles of what the Apostle Paul is talking about here, right? They wanted that attention. It was what was in at the time, okay? In our society, no different. It's always what is the new thing that will make someone famous? What is something that will put someone on the top? Like 10 years ago, to be in the in crowd, you needed to be transgender. You needed to be, you had to go with the woke left. Now, it's like people are going to the woke right and being all traditional. And everyone's a journalist nowadays, right? Everyone wants to talk about politics. And you know what the term the Gen Zers use for that? Grifters, right? There's a term they use, grifters, or clout. Clout is instant fame. A grifter is someone that runs to something just for the sake of attention, just for the sake of their personal gain. So you'll have these influencers online, and they'll be like, today, Donald Trump said this. Today, they'll talk about the news, but it's like, are you really passionate about the content, or do you want your face to be shown? Right? I don't know. That's appeal to essentially, you're appealing to their incentives, right? It's a fallacy. I don't know, but what I'm saying is, like, it would be common in our generation for people to talk about journalism, talk about politics, but again, does someone care? They want their face to be shown? They want to get the most amount of likes, right? So it's no different as far as the super apostles, because they want it to be prestigious, they want it to be known, and Paul's saying, don't follow these people. Right? Don't follow these guys. They're false. They're false apostles, workers of Satan. Okay. So, essentially, this is the foundation of how the gospel was spread across the Roman Empire and essentially the world. Okay. Now, if you know Rome, what was Rome known for? As far as infrastructure. Roads, right? There were the Roman roads. All roads lead to Rome, right? And at this time, from the gospel, that's where they were able to travel so easily around, right? And able to spread the gospel. And where the gospel went to Rome, it eventually led to the world 2,000 years later. And it's still, right? But again, this is the foundational part right here. Jesus to the 12 apostles, to Paul, to Silas, to Barnabas, all the way till today. Okay? Any questions?
No, that was good.
No?
That was
I have a
good.
question.
Danny?
The road straight that you talked about.
Acts 9, yes.
I love that. I love that. What country did you say that it's in?
Syria.
Syria.
Syria, yeah. You can go there.
So, okay.
I'm not going to go there, but...
Yeah. No. It's. I'll tell you later, but it's kind of important that it's still there.
Yeah,
And Jesus
that's
himself talked about it.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
And therefore, presenting the gospel,
yeah,
it's still there. You know what I mean? It's there. Paul, where Paul was raised at Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives, or where David killed Goliath. It's still, it's still there.
yeah,
And you look at all the stuff that's going on in the world politically.
yeah,
You look at the back of your Bible and you turn on the news. It's the same place. It's Jerusalem. It's the same thing.
yeah.
Hating the
Bonnie
Jews.
is right now.
Yeah.
Bonnie is
Yeah,
in
Bonnie's
Jerusalem
there.
right now.
Yep.
Oh, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
We just got there.
So, Straight Street is in Acts 9, where Jesus tells
Acts 9.
Ananias, go
I'll
to
tell you,
Straight
I'm gonna-
Street because Ananias is there and Paul needs to talk to him. And it's not that Paul, there's a pride that the Apostle Paul walked there. It's the fact that Jesus called it out by name and it's still there. That's what's cool about it.
Yeah.
Acts 9 what? Just
That's amazing.
Acts 9 what?
Don't know. It's so, I'll look for
I'll find it. No
Yeah.
big deal.
So I think this concludes our lesson on the apostles. Okay. Now next week we're going to start a new series on the book of Hebrews. Okay, we'll just take it one chapter at a time. And what's interesting in the book of Hebrews is we don't know who the author is. It's the only book in the New Testament we don't know who the author is. But what the early church fathers say, who is the author? It's either Apollos or Barnabas. So it's interesting that we just studied these guys. So if I say, some people say it's Apollos, you should know who or some people say it's Barnabas. Right? There's a reference point to it. But and if there's any other topic or book that you're interested in studying, we could do that too. Okay.
What book do you say it is? Which
Hebrews.
book did you say?
Hebrews. Hebrews.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right,
dear.
guys. Guys online, we're going to do communion, so you're more than welcome to stay online, or if not, I'll see you next week, but we're going to do communion here, and you're more than welcome to partake, okay?
Okay, God bless you guys.
All
Thank
right,
you.
I'll see you, Chris. All right.
After Jesus resurrected and he was on earth, do we know how long he was here?
No, not for a while. Not a long time.
Oh, not a long time.
No,
Like
no.
less than a year?
Yeah, definitely less than a year, yeah. And just because of timing, like dates. Yeah. This is our time of communion where we celebrate the death, burial, and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ as Christ came here. Oh, another thing I forgot. It just, the way it, in the beginning was what? The Word.
The word.
Okay. I'm like, well, what's Greek philosophy and its influence? Philo. Remember, if I talk about Philo of Alexandria, like he was a Jew that brought philosophy and the Old Testament together. He was the one that popularized the Logos, the Word. The Logos was what connected the immaterial and the material, the logic of the divine. Yeah, you see that? It was known as the logic of the divine, and essentially that ideology was spread, and people were known as they were always talking about the Logos, the Word. So when John 1:1 comes up, and he says, "In the beginning was the Word, the Logos, and the Word was with God, but the Word was God. That revolutionized everything. So context, if you're wondering, why does John start out? Because he takes the philosophy of Philo of Alexandria, and he takes Genesis 1:1, and he kind of combines the two together. So, anyways, I said that it came to mind.
That's where John got that.
Huh?
You're
Huh?
saying John, the
Mhm.
Apostle John got that.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
well, like it was just known in the first century. The word, like people knew the word as the logic of God. Yeah. So John coming in saying, "Well, I'm gonna put flesh on that logos, and that's Jesus." Yeah, I'll tell you who that is, essentially. But